happiness can still be found, even in the darkest of times, if one only remembers to turn on the light. Dumbledore. In the dark phases of life, when failure, loss, or loneliness strikes, the human mind tends to close off like a windowless room. We start to believe that darkness is the entire world. Darkness is not a powerful entity. It is merely the absence of light. Just a small act of awareness, a positive thought, an encouraging word, a fragile hope, is like turning on a light in a dark room. Immediately, the darkness must retreat. The power of perception. Sadness often exaggerates reality, making us believe that every door is closed. But when we turn on the light, meaning when we actively change our perspective, we realize that in that room, there are still beautiful paintings on the walls, a comfortable chair to rest in, and a path leading out. Light does not create a new world. It only helps us see the world that already exists. Happiness is not a luxury that only appears on perfect days, like a small lamp that each person carries within themselves. When the darkness of life descends, what matters is not waiting for the sun to rise, but remembering that we always hold the switch to the light in our hands. And sometimes, just a gentle touch on that switch is enough to make the entire soul shine brightly. Owning our story can be hard, but not nearly as difficult as spending our lives running from it. Embracing our vulnerabilities is risky, but not nearly as dangerous as giving up on love and belonging and joy, the experiences that make us the most vulnerable. Only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light. Brené Brown. Each person carries a personal story, a silent record of mistakes, pains, scars, and the vulnerable parts we often try to hide. Accepting that story sometimes feels like standing before a too honest mirror. It reflects not only the light, but also the shadows we don't want to see. Many people choose to run away. They run into busyness, into perfect masks, or into the illusion that if we don't look back at the past, it will disappear. But the human psyche is like a shadow under the light. The more we try to turn our back, the more it silently follows. And the price of running away is a lifetime of fragmentation, where we exist but do not truly live. Accepting one's weaknesses is always a risky act. It requires us to lower our defensive armor and admit that we too can be hurt, can make mistakes. But the profound paradox of life lies here. Vulnerability itself is the door to the most beautiful human experiences. Love, belonging, joy, all require us to open our hearts, and when we open them, we accept the possibility of being hurt. Refusing that for safety is actually like locking the door of our heart from the inside. We avoid pain, but at the same time, we lose the vibrancy of life. Only when people are brave enough to step into their own darkness, facing fears, insecurities, and imperfect parts, do they discover a powerful truth. Within the darkness, there is always the seed of light. For inner light is not something that appears when we are perfect, but something born when we dare to be honest with ourselves. Like a miner who must go deep into the earth to find diamonds, people must also go through the dark regions of their soul to discover the infinite strength quietly waiting. And when that light is ignited, we realize that our story, with all its cracks and flaws, is not something to run from, but the starting point of freedom. Someone I loved once gave me a box full of darkness. It took me years to understand that this too was a gift. Mary Oliver. Painful experiences, betrayal, separation, hurt, things that at first we just want to throw far away. When that box is given, we feel like we've been left in a windowless room. Every memory becomes small shards of glass. The more we touch, the more it hurts. In that moment, we believe we've only received loss, but time has a very quiet way of transforming the meaning of things that seem cruel. Many years pass, and people begin to look back at that box with a more mature mind. We realize that darkness doesn't just cover, it also nurtures, like a seed that must lie in the dark earth before sprouting. Hurts also quietly foster understanding, resilience, and emotional depth in people. What we once called a wound turns out to be where the heart learns to grow. Painful experiences often force us to confront ourselves with the fear of abandonment, the fragility of love, the imperfect parts in our soul. At first, confronting it feels like stepping into a dark hallway, but it is in that hallway that we begin to discover small lights of awareness. We understand ourselves better, love more consciously, and learn to stand firm without completely depending on others. The box full of darkness ultimately becomes a beautiful paradox of life. The person who left may not even know they left a gift. Not a gift of immediate happiness, but a gift of growth. And when we are calm enough to open that box again, we realize that within that darkness, there is something very precious, the ability to turn pain into light for our own life. Resilience is accepting your new reality, even if it's less good than the one you had before. You can fight it. You can do nothing but scream about what you've lost, or you can accept that and try to put together something that's good. Elizabeth Edwards. The moment we realize that the old world has closed and we still decide to keep living, when a new reality appears, especially one less beautiful than before, the mind often reacts like a storm. We deny, we get angry, we grieve what was lost. We stand amid the ruins of what was once familiar, like someone standing in a collapsed house, still clutching the key to a door that no longer exists. In that phase, people have many choices. We can resist reality, try to turn back time, live in perpetual regret about the old days. We can also sink into lamentations of loss, turning pain into a repeating melody in the mind. But both paths have one thing in common. They keep us in the past, where real life no longer happens. Resilience begins when people dare to do something seemingly simple, but incredibly difficult. Accept. Acceptance is not surrender, nor is it denying the pain. It is the act of looking straight at reality and saying to ourselves, "This is where I stand." In that moment, the mind stops fighting what cannot be changed, and inner energy is freed to do something else. Build. Like a gardener after a big storm, they cannot return the garden to yesterday, but they can pick up branches, till the soil again, and plant new seeds. The garden afterward may be different, even unlike its old beauty, but if cared for with patience and hope, it can still bloom in a completely new way. Resilience is not a story about never losing. It is a story about people learning to live on after loss. When we accept the new reality and start rebuilding from what's left, we discover a quiet strength. Life may not return to what it was, but it always has the potential to become good in a different way. To live in this world, you must be able to do 3 things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends upon it, and, when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. Mary Oliver. Living in this world is like holding a fragile crystal glass, beautiful, precious, but always capable of breaking. Humans are born into a profound paradox of life. We are given the ability to love intensely, but everything we love, people, moments, youth, even life itself, is finite. To mature in this world, we must learn 3 things that seem simple but are the hardest lessons for the soul. First, we must learn to love what is mortal. This requires a subtle courage, because loving something fragile means accepting the possibility of losing it. Many people, out of fear of pain, choose to keep distance from emotions. They build safe walls, believing that if they don't love too much, they won't hurt too deeply. But a closed heart is like a locked garden. No storms pass through, but no seasons of flowers bloom either. Second, we must know to hold tightly to what we love, cherishing it as if our life is tied to it. Because, in psychological reality, those connections, love, family, memories, small moments, create the sense of meaning in life. They are invisible threads that keep us steady amid the chaos of the world. When we embrace those things with all our presence, life becomes vibrant and deep. But then comes the final lesson, the most painful: letting go. Not everything we love stays forever. Time passes. People change. And many things leave our life like boats, quietly leaving the dock. Letting go doesn't mean love disappears. It just changes form. It becomes memory, gratitude, or a warm silence in the soul. The wisdom of life does not lie in avoiding love or avoiding loss. It lies in the ability to expand the heart to love fully, cherish what we have, and when the time for parting comes, we are still gentle enough to let it flow with life. For it is in that cycle, loving, holding, then letting go, that people learn to live fully in this finite world. Often, when you think you're at the end of something, you're at the beginning of something else. Fred Rogers. In the flow of life, people often see an ending as a door slamming shut, a cold, full stop that leaves us standing in emptiness. When a relationship closes, a job departs, or a phase of life vanishes, our mind easily believes that everything has truly ended. That feeling is like when dusk falls, the sky darkens, and we think light has left the world. But somewhere, dawn is quietly preparing. People often cling to familiarity. We want stories with clear endings, want to know that a chapter closing means the book is done. But life doesn't operate like a novel with a last page. It is more like a river. Each bend seems like a stop, but really just where the water changes direction. So when we think we've ended something, it's very possible we're just stepping over an invisible boundary into another story we haven't yet recognized. Endings often bring pain because they force us to leave our old self behind. But it is in the emptiness after a door closes that people begin to restructure their inner world. We think differently, feel deeper, and see the world with eyes tempered by experience. What was once loss gradually becomes the foundation for a new shape of life, like a forest after a big fire. At first glance, only ashes and blackened trees remain, but under that smoldering soil, seeds are waiting for the chance to sprout. What we call an end is sometimes just the necessary clearing for something new to appear. Seeing the hidden movement behind the full stops when we think everything has ended. Perhaps life is just gently turning to another page. And on that new page, we begin to become a different version of ourselves, deeper, more mature, and ready for stories we never imagined before. It is by going down into the abyss that we recover the treasures of life. Where you stumble, there lies your treasure. Joseph Campbell. We are often taught to climb up, higher, stronger, more successful. But the paradox of life is that the deepest discoveries of the soul often happen when we fall down. When failure, loss, or despair appears, we feel like we're stepping into a cold abyss. The darkness is so thick that we believe that place holds only pain and ending. Yet, it is in those seemingly lowest moments that people begin to see things that, when standing on the heights, we never noticed. Going down into the abyss means confronting the truest parts of ourselves, fears, weaknesses, limits we once denied. It is when the shell of the ego cracks. We can no longer rely on titles, successes, or perfect images. And precisely when all shells fall away, the true essence of a person emerges, fragile but full of potential. Like a miner who must go deep into the dark earth to find diamonds, people must also go through their own dark regions to find the true value of life. Where you stumble, is not just a mark of failure. It is a map. Each fall reveals something. Perhaps a lesson about our limits. Perhaps an awakening to what truly matters. Or strength we never knew we had. The cracks in life are like fissures in the ground. It is there that light can seep in. Looking back after years of hardship, many realize that the treasures of life do not lie on smooth paths, but in the places where they once stumbled. For it is there that they find resilience, compassion, and the ability to rise stronger than before. The abyss is not the end of the journey. It is where life hides its most important treasures. And sometimes, the most painful fall is the key that opens the door to a deeper and stronger version of ourselves. Anything is possible if you've got enough nerve. J.K. Rowling. In human life, the boundary between impossible and possible rarely lies in circumstances, but often in the courage of each person. The world does not lack opportunities, paths, or unexplored potentials. What is rarer is the person who dares to step forward. For courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to walk even when the heart is still trembling. People naturally seek safety. We are used to staying in familiar circles, places where outcomes are predictable, where we don't have to face risks or failures. But those circles sometimes become invisible cages. They keep us safe, but also keep us small. Big dreams, new journeys, or profound changes in life always lie outside that comfort zone, where each step requires a bit of soulful daring. Lighting a small flame in thick fog, we don't see the entire road ahead, but that light is enough to illuminate the next step. And strangely, when a person dares to take the first step, the world seems to shift with them. Doors that seemed locked before begin to open. Possibilities never thought of gradually appear. Acting true to oneself. It is when we dare to live according to what we believe. Dare to love knowing we can be hurt. Dare to try knowing we can fail. Each such action is like a seed sown in the soil. Not every seed sprouts immediately, but the planting process itself makes life rich and vibrant. When saying anything is possible if you've got enough nerve, it doesn't mean life will always be easy or perfect. It means that the door of possibility always exists, and the key to that door lies in human courage. Just a heart brave enough to step out of the shadow of fear, and a whole new horizon can open. And sometimes, the most extraordinary thing begins with a very small decision, daring to step forward. Lessons of wisdom are like reaching maturity. You don't suddenly become happier, wealthier, or more powerful, but you understand the world around you better and are more at peace with yourself. Learning life's lessons is not to make your life perfect, but to see life as it truly is. Elisabeth Kübler-Ross. Maturity is not a brilliant moment when life suddenly becomes easier, nor when people suddenly have more money, power, or happiness. Maturity is like dawn spreading across the sky, not noisy, not sudden, but little by little, making everything clearer. When we learn life's lessons, the outer world may remain the same, still with difficulties, losses, and uncontrollable things, but our inner world has changed. Learning from life is actually the process of the mind gradually expanding. Experiences, both joyful and painful, are like small keys opening rooms in our awareness. When young, people often see the world in simple lines: right or wrong, win or lose, happy or suffering. But the more we go through, we begin to realize that life is much more complex. Each person carries their own story. Each event hides a lesson, and often what we called failure is actually the silent turning point of growth. Learning life's lessons is not the process of perfecting the world, but adjusting our own view. We no longer expect everything to be perfect. We learn to accept that life is inherently imperfect, and that acceptance brings a very special form of peace. It is like when a sailor finally understands the rhythm of the ocean. Waves still rise and fall, but he no longer panics at each wave. When people understand the world better, they become gentler with themselves. We are less harsh on mistakes, less hasty in judgments, and know to cherish the simple things we once overlooked. It turns out, life's lessons are not to turn us into a perfect version, but to help us live more truly. And when we see life as it truly is, with both light and darkness, we find a deep peace. The peace of someone who understands that life doesn't need to be perfect to still be meaningful. As my sufferings mounted, I soon realized that there were two ways in which I could respond to my situation, either to react with bitterness or seek to transform the suffering into a creative force. I decided to follow the latter course. Martin Luther King Jr. When pain piles up, like successive waves crashing on the shore of the soul, people soon stand before a silent fork that decides their whole life. Suffering itself does not decide who we become. What decides is how we respond to it. Each wound carries two seeds, one of bitterness and one of creativity. Which seed sprouts depends on the choice of the heart. Reacting with bitterness is the most understandable path for humans. When hurt, the mind tends to close off, building defensive walls and viewing the world with skeptical eyes. Pain, then, is like a drop of ink in a clear glass of water, gradually spreading, coloring every thought and emotion. People begin to see everything through the lens of loss, and the past becomes a burden pulling them down. But there is also another path, quieter, harder, but full of power. It is when people decide not to let pain be just a wound, but turn it into a source of energy. This is the moment when we stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What can I do from this?" Pain then becomes the raw material of creativity. Like coal, under the pressure of time, can turn into diamond. Great souls in history often grow in that way. They write, create, love more deeply, or contribute to the world precisely from the cracks in their own lives. For when people go through suffering and still retain the ability to turn it into meaning, they discover a special strength, the strength of transformation. Choosing to turn pain into creative force is not denying suffering, but redefining it. The pain is still there, but instead of becoming chains binding the soul, it becomes the fire, forging the spirit. And from that fire, people not only survive, they also create light for their own life and sometimes for those around them.